Welcome to the 29th Annual Rhode Island Statewide Historic Preservation Conference. My name is Ted Sanderson. I'm the Executive Director of the Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission. We're delighted to see all of you here today. This year's conference theme is Pride and Preservation, and I'm proud that more than 500 of you have gathered today in the historic town of Warren. The Preservation Conference in Rhode Island has become one of the largest and certainly best state preservation conferences in the United States. Congratulations to all of you. As you know, the theme this year is Pride and Preservation. St. Augustine called pride the love of one's own excellence. Today, we'll see a lot of excellence and pride here in Warren. For 3,000 years, Native Americans lived in the area known as Soames, and Burrs Hill remains a place of proud heritage for Native Americans today. European settlement began here in 1653, and by the mid-18th century, Warren had grown into a thriving seaport. Modern Warren can be proud of the historic buildings that have been preserved throughout the town, especially in the Warren Waterfront Historic District listed on the National Register of Historic Places, where everything is within walking distance. Along Water Street, we'll see local landmarks like the 1743 Maxwell House, and nearby St. Mark's Church, designed by architect Russell Warren, the Warren Armory, and many beautifully preserved historic houses. Along Main Street is a community-based commercial district where historic buildings house local businesses, all within walking distance of each other. The 1916 school building is becoming Hope in Maine, Rhode Island's first food business incubator, where culinary entrepreneurs learn the recipes for business success. At the north end of town is the historic Warren Manufacturing Factory, built in 1896. It's better known as the American Tourister Factory, until it packed its bags and left. Now the building's about to undergo a $25 million rehabilitation to create 220 apartments overlooking the Warren River for tenants who will move in, unpack, and become proud new residents of Warren. And in the very near future, and I'm speaking now to my local friends as well as to all of you from throughout the state, in the very near future, I hope the 1897 Bristol County Gas and Electric Building, now owned by National Grid, will be repaired. This handsome brick Renaissance revival structure is a rundown eyesore at the entrance to Warren. And National Grid really ought to show more pride in being a good neighbor and fix it up. There are many people and organizations in Warren that I'm proud to thank for their help in putting on today's conference. The town of Warren has been a tremendous ally in organizing the conference, and especially Council President Christopher Stanley. And Councilman Joseph DePasquale not only helped organize the conference, he's one of our tour guides today. Town Planner Carolyn Wells and Library Director Pat Redfern, Fire Chief Al Gallinelli, and Police Lieutenant Ronald Brule have all been very important in organizing logistics and making plans for the day. Town Clerk Julie Coelho and Deputy Clerk Sandy Speroni have also been great help, and Harbor Master Ed Cabral helped us organize the boat trips. Mo Clare of Economic Development has assisted us in many ways. Senator Walter Feelig is participating in the conference today as a speaker, and if there are other elected officials that I don't have your names, I thank you for joining us as well. The Warren Preservation Society has been a stalwart in all the preservation activities here in town, particularly Eileen Collins and Davison Bolster, and Warren Preservation has really been a great help to us today. Along with Warren Preservation, we've gotten help from Warren Heritage Foundation, Massasoit Historical Association, Barrington Preservation Society, and the Warren Voluntary Historic District Commission. And by the way, congratulations to the Historic District Commission and the town on your new demolition delay ordinance. Might be a model for other towns throughout the state. The Baptist Church, where we are right now, and we'll meet Reverend Esther Irish in just a couple of minutes, but I also want to thank Dan Cahoon and Kevin for all of their help here. St. Mary's of the Bay, and especially Father Doug Grant and Phil Ballou have been very helpful. And at the Warren Armory, how could we have gotten along without Ed Thiebridge? I also want to thank all of our speakers, all of our tour guides, and all of our volunteers. You make the day move smoothly. Volunteers today come from Roger Williams University, Salve Regina, Brown, Johnson & Wales, and the University of Rhode Island and Rhode Island College. And volunteers are wearing blue ribbons, and they can answer absolutely any question you can think of to ask them. Let me also thank members of the Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission, current and past, and commission staff who've been working to make this event a great success. And let me ask my commissioners and staff members to please stand up, and let's all thank them for their service. Many of you know that what really makes the conference work is the hard work of Sarah Zurier and Janet Boletto. Let's thank them as well. So thank you to all of our sponsors, and especially to local businesses that sponsored this year's conference here in Warren: Blount Boats, Blount Market, Discover Warren, Dish, Navigant Credit Union, Scott's Doors and Windows, Water Rower, and many of you have already enjoyed the friendly sponsorship by Pastiche Fine Desserts downstairs with your coffee this morning. Thanks to all of our sponsors. This year, the Warren Baptist Church, where we're holding this morning's session, is taking pride in celebrating its 250th anniversary. The current Gothic Revival building was designed by architect Russell Warren in 1844. The first church for Warren Baptist was burned by the British in 1778 as part of the Revolution and replaced in 1784. The chancel, where we're meeting this morning, dates from 1913 and features an opalescent stained glass window made by the Gorham Manufacturing Company. It's a beautiful church. It's one of the wonders of Warren, and it's an important community institution as well. So I'm pleased to introduce and to thank Reverend Esther Irish for her and the congregation's hospitality to us this morning.
This is the first time I have looked out and seen this many faces in this area. We are very happy to be hosting you today. Just to have this many people here is a wonderful feeling. I've been here 10 years now, and as we celebrate our 250th, we invite people every second Sunday of the month to come to a concert at 3 p.m. and every fourth Sunday of the month we have a special speaker at 10 a.m. Tomorrow happens to be Rhode Island's own J. Stanley Lemons, retired professor, expert in Rhode Island history, especially church history, and he will be speaking on history tomorrow. If you are available 10 o'clock, we would love to have you in addition. Each of you in your bags today was given what we call a RAC card. Kathy Micken, a professor at Roger Williams University, and I worked on this, and Roger Williams University paid to have these in your bags today. So thank you, Roger Williams. I hope that you enjoy your day today. We do have people with name tags that say Baptist Church in Warren representative. If you have any questions that you would like answered about the church, most of them have lived most of their lives in Warren, and you can ask them Warren questions as well. Thank you all for coming today.
I think we all know that all preservation is really local, and that's why town officials are so important, not just to putting on a conference, but in making historic preservation work at the town and city level. So I'm pleased to introduce and also to thank Council President Christopher Stanley for all that he's done for us today, but also all that he and the council do for the town of Warren.
Welcome to Warren. You're sitting in the smallest town, the smallest county, the smallest state with the largest heart. Interesting fact, even he's gone through a pretty good collection of the history and the buildings and the structures. What you might not know is we're the clam bake capital of the world. And this year's theme, Pride and Preservation, speaks volumes of who we are as people. You're going to hear a lot about the bricks and the mortar and the structures. But to us, what is most important and our most valuable asset in this community are the people. Because without those individuals, this community would not run. Particularly Davidson Bolster, he lobbied hard to get you here. I thank him from the bottom of my heart for that. This is a tremendous town. If you read the papers, you'll know that we're struggling financially, but we not once do we struggle in our hearts with the decisions that we make to preserve Warren and benefit the people that serve us. Our greatest attribute are the volunteers throughout the town. Individuals stepping forward to fill in the gaps that we cannot. We have an 100% volunteer fire department. If you're injured, if you're hurt, if you're in need in any way, shape, or form, it's those men and women who step forward. When we cut recreation out of the budget, it's citizens who step forward to fill that gap. It's citizens who roll up their arms in their sleeves and work to preserve down the road the armory. While we struggle and we have financial issues, we certainly have a great deal of heart here, and it makes a great deal of difference. We have a beautiful Water Street. We have a beautiful river to look upon. We work hard to protect that. And every one of you are going to benefit from today, from this little jewel, this little tiny plot of land that means so great to so many. Many of us are born here, many of us will die here. We go off, we earn our degrees in different states, and there's something that always pulls us back. And it's not just the bricks and the mortar and the structures, it's the people that we grew up with and live with and have fell in love with here. This is an extraordinary, extraordinary town, and it is bursting with life because of some of the people sitting in this audience who are members of our community. And I implore you that at 6 o'clock, when the conference is over, go explore on your own. Take a walk down to the Lecter's Pharmacy, buy yourself a cabinet. Take a trip to Rod's Grill, grab yourself a wiener. Go across to the Warren House of Pizza and grab yourself a grinder. They're very good. We have tremendous restaurants, we have tremendous faith, and I thank you for coming here and giving us an opportunity to showcase this. This is my home, and today it's your home too. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much. In just a few minutes, we're going to introduce our keynote speaker, but first, I'd like to return briefly to our conference theme of pride and preservation. The word proud derives from words in Old English and Old French, meaning brave or valiant. The sense of having a high opinion of oneself may reflect the Anglo-Saxons' opinion of the Norman knights, who called themselves proud. In other words, pride and preservation is not just the love of excellence, it's also a call to arms. As preservation's proud warriors, we face challenges to preserving excellent architecture and historic communities. In the coming months, the Rhode Island General Assembly will decide whether to continue our state historic preservation tax credits. In the program's first 12 years, over $1.5 billion of private investment that would not have happened otherwise was invested in rehabilitating historic buildings here in Rhode Island. In 2013, the program was extended to 30 additional projects worth another $200 million. In 2014, Governor Chafee has proposed another extension. The Historic Preservation Tax Credit is Rhode Island's best economic development tool, and it saved nearly 300 historic buildings while revitalizing communities throughout the state. A second issue in the General Assembly, A second issue in the General Assembly is deciding whether to let voters cast a ballot in favor of historic preservation grants for public historic sites. 10 years ago, the State Preservation Grant Program helped to restore 86 sites, including some of the places you'll visit today here in Warren, and every state grant dollar leveraged $12 in matching funds. Look for handouts in your conference packet about tax credits and grants. In the coming year, there'll be more challenges, like preserving working waterfronts and dealing with coastal flooding in historic neighborhoods, or appreciating historic landscapes, or building local businesses on historic main streets like right here in Warren, or strengthening the historic preservation movement and helping the owners of historic homes to take care of their property, or realizing the benefits of smart growth to make healthy communities where pedestrians outnumber cars. Today's panel discussions and tours will address many of these issues and more. In addition to the educational sessions today, I hope each of you will make new acquaintances and new colleagues. As advocates who take pride in preservation, we need to stand together and address the issues facing the preservation movement in Rhode Island today. Maya Farish is a preservation advocate who's been a leader of the pack in many ways. And today she's representing Roger Williams University, the sponsor of the keynote address. The university's outstanding School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation is a leader in the field. In addition, Roger Williams' many community outreach programs bring students and faculty expertise to solve historic preservation and other issues throughout the state. I'm pleased to welcome Maya Farish, who will introduce today's keynote speaker. Maya?
And it's just great to be here again, my third year. I want to do my Vanna thing for a minute because Ted referred to flyers in your folders. The flyer about the tax credits looks like this, and the state grant preservation program is also included. It's a call to action, it's talking points, it's everything you need to do to talk to your legislators and other elected officials to get the tax credits passed and the state preservation passed this session. So let's do that. The other plug I'd like to do is for our Smart Growth partner here in Rhode Island, Grow Smart Rhode Island. They're having their biannual summit, Power of Place Summit, and it's taking place later in May, on May 23rd, I believe. This flyer will also be in your packet, and I really encourage you to sign up for this program as well. It's the other great convening of our people in this state. So thank you for that, Ted. So as Ted said, I am from Roger Williams University, and my husband is the president of the university, and we are proud to be a sponsor of this program for many years. I've lost count. And I also want to say that Davison told me that he was working his magic to try to get the conference here, and I was like, go for it. So when Sarah and Ted told me that the conference was actually happening here, I was just thrilled. I'm from Bristol. Bristol and Warren share a lot of things together, our school district, but we also started, with Davison's help, something called the Bristol Warren Art Night, which is going into its third year, and it's a roaring success to get all of the gallery people, and we now have performing arts people. So Bristol and Warren are birds of a feather. We're great partners, and I'm so proud to be here enjoying this conference in Warren today. So I am really delighted to have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker today. Mark Fenton is a man on a mission, and he jumps off of bridges to make his point. He is passionate about promoting public health through community design and our need to engineer physical activity back into American communities and lives. Okay, the bridge thing. If you haven't seen his YouTube video, I encourage you to look at it. He's laughing at me now. It's a very, very good video. We won't be jumping off of any bridge. You promised me you won't be jumping off of any bridges today. I think our councilman would find that a liability issue. We preservationists know that historic communities are among the most walkable and the most livable. And thanks to Mark, many communities are learning that preserving and revitalizing their historic walkable towns has the added benefit of making their citizens healthier. Mark works around the country to assist these communities and other organizations with designing environments and developing policies and programs that help to shape places where more people can walk, ride a bike, and take transit more of the time. So preservation advocates, take heart. When you become frustrated with the inability of your elected officials to understand that preservation is good for jobs and the economy, channel Mark Fenton with your message, preservation is good for your health. Mark's message will be demonstrated today in Warren. Just don't go near any bridges. Let's give a warm Rhode Island welcome to Mark Fenton.
Cat's out of the bag now, obviously. I'm a troublemaker and a civil disobedient, and there it is. So maybe I'll tell the bridge story a little later. It's a privilege to be with you. Thank you very much. It's really an honor to join you. And I do have to forewarn you, though, I've got bad news. And Maya has sort of already alluded to it. My goal is to add to your to-do list. And I know you people, if you've already got a really long one. You're trying to save the planet, you're trying to save your communities, you're trying to do the good work that you have before you. And I'm going to say your good work is even more important than you might realize, because I'm going to make a strong case for the connection that Maya just alluded to, that in fact you work on what we call the triple bottom line. Not just the physical health of our communities, the environmental health. I'd argue you're working on the economic health and the public health of our communities. That's at the heart of the work that we all are doing here. Indeed, I've had the good privilege of working with the Department of Health as well as with Smart Growth Rhode Island. It's interesting you mentioned them a moment ago, and that is a worthy conference. Definitely go to the Grow Smart conference with your Complete Streets Coalition. We do walk audits. We'll do one later this morning. Rain or not, we're going, right, Paul? And I think all the walking, those programs are still going to go on. And here we were doing one in Wakefield on a lovely walkable sort of downtown Main Street area. Here we're doing one up in North Kingstown, perhaps a little less conducive to pedestrian activity, you would agree? And I would suggest you, appropriately named Devil's Foot Road, right? I think that's, boy, they got that name right. And what I want to say about that is, I think the date of construction of those roads gives away a lot of what you might expect to see on them. You know, when they were built and what they were built for. This road built much more contemporarily for moving cars and trucks, right? The other one was really built for moving people. And that's what we have to think about, the scale of our design. That's at the heart of a lot of what we talk about. So these are just a couple of things I'd like to touch on very briefly to set the tone for the day. Does healthy design really matter? I'm going to make a little bit of a public health argument. It's part of the price of admission with me. You got to hear the public health argument. And then I'm going to ask this question. If we build it, will they come? People constantly say, Mark, this idea of building a healthy community, is there any evidence that if you do the stuff you're talking about, you actually change behavior? And the answer, by the way, is a vehement yes. We've got very good evidence about that. So then we'll talk a little bit about how communities get there, and I'm going to leave you with a challenge to think about as you work, as you go forward. Having said that, I'd like you to do a little exercise with me. I'd like you to, this is a mental exercise. I'd like you to actually close your eyes right now, really do this, okay? And picture yourself as a young kid, as young as you can remember, and try to recall your earliest fond recollection of being physically active as a youngster. So play your memory tapes back. Councilman, I'm looking at you. There it is. Okay, good. Eyes are closed, and we're thinking about our earliest fond recollection of being physically active as a little kid. And go back as far as you can go. I'm not talking high school sports. I'm thinking really little kid. Think about the physical environment, where you were, who you were with, what you were doing. Get that image in your mind. Really picture yourself. As soon as you've got it, you can open your eyes, turn to the person next to you, and share those recollections right now. 10 seconds each. Share your recollections. What were you thinking of?
What were you thinking of? Playing Ducky Boy Rock in the school.
to spend the next 40 minutes carrying those conversations forward rather than listening to me. But there's a method to my madness. So, thinking about those recollections you were just sharing, from everything from playing in the backyard, riding bikes, BMX bikes, I heard walking on the beach, in the woods, on the farm, swinging on a rope, all sorts of those kinds of things. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if your recollection is, if your answer is yes regarding your recollections. I'm going to ask a series of questions. How many of you recall activities that largely only occurred with kids of the same age and gender? Same age and gender kids. How many remember an activity that required the presence of an adult? How many remembered activities that occurred at a scheduled time and place? How many remembered an activity that had a uniform that you had to purchase or that you were given as part of it? How many remembered activities that required an umpire or a referee or something like that? How many recalled activities where you might well have been with kids of different ages and different genders? So boys and girls, older and younger, playing together, whoever you could get, basically, to get a kickball team together. How many remember activities that there did not necessarily have to be an adult present? How many actually thought about activities that you could not have gotten away with if an adult had, in fact, been present and tell the truth? I'm concerned Mr. Sorensen's hand went up, but, you know. So, how many remembered activities that involved a wheeled vehicle, a bicycle, a tricycle, a scooter, a skateboard, maybe the old roller skates that had a key? Who had something like that? Okay. How many had a recollection that involved water, swimming in it, fishing in it, skating on frozen ponds, damming up a neighborhood creek, playing in a pond, chasing crawdads, whatever? How many, if you allow me to use a term of art, how many of you remember to some degree or another having been a free-range kid? Yeah, I was kind of a free-range kid. Yeah, wow, a lot of us. Look around the room. Don't look at me. Look around the room. Keep those hands up. I want you to see how many free-range kids we have. Okay, two important questions. These are the important questions of the day, so listen very carefully. How many of you believe the majority of kids growing up today in America are free-range kids? Yeah, I got a lot of free-range kids in America. Look around the room. Look. Last question. How many think it's good for the health of America's youth that we're raising a healthy and robust generation that they are not free-range? Hands up. Good thing we don't have free-range kids anymore. Hands up for that. Let's think about what we've just said. As recently as a generation or two ago, we had a lot of free-range kids. It's not that long ago. It's 20, 30, 40 years, right? Lots of free-range kids. We all agree there are not so many now, and we agree it's probably not good for them. To which I ask you one simple question. What precisely are you doing about it? No, that's not true. He said nothing. I think if you're working in historic preservation, you're actually doing something about it. That's the good news. But I want to make sure that it's explicit, that we make that connection, and we do more, because we're not doing enough. Now listen, far smarter people than I are writing about this. There's a lot of interesting research about the fact that we don't have free-range kids anymore. This book in the top right is called Last Child in the Woods by a man named Richard Louv. He does detailed research about the shortcomings of a life not lived outdoors. That we're seeing rising rates of chronic disease risk and obesity among kids, but there are also questions about their development. Where are the innovative skills and the leadership skills of having to be team captains and creating the inventiveness of making up games like you used to do. Sort of the self-starter sort of skills, negotiation skills of running a pickup game of wiffle ball without an adult to tell you what the rules are, right? All things that I would argue you as community leaders started developing when you were 7 years old, being a leader on the Little League field in your neighborhood. That's how you started as a community leader, I suspect, at that age. And you carried those skills to adulthood. Where's the next generation of those kids? Right? And there's lots of talk about what's leading to this problem, and many people say, well, you tell me, Mark, we can't let our kids be free range. Kids can't walk to school like you used to do as a kid, because what? Why can't we? It's not safe. There are scary men with big, thick mustaches hiding behind every tree. The mustache men are out there, right? Except the problem with that is we can find no data that tells us that there's any increase in violent crime against kids now versus 30 or 40 years ago. Let's look at, for example, over the time span, over the 30 years from about 1970 to 2000, in which the percentage of kids walking and bicycling to school dropped from 40% to only about 15%, and the percentage being driven by car went from 15 to almost 50%. That is, almost half of kids today driven to school by car. Dramatic change, 30 years, no change in violent crime against kids, but lots of change in how and where we build schools. That's the middle school that I went to in upstate New York, a beautiful historic structure on the National Register in my town of Brockport, New York. Back when schools were average size, they were neighborhood schools, average size was quite small, and most of the students up at least through middle school could walk to their neighborhood school, right? Now what do we build, guys? Giant mega schools on acres and acres of land, out on the edge, often the cheapest land, got to keep our property taxes down, right? So we find the cheapest land, we build these mega schools that every child is driven to, often not by even bus, but by car. I would argue that's an abandonment of an historic approach that we had to education. Neighborhood-based schools that could be walked to, that parents were heavily involved with, that the neighborhood felt was a community asset, the ball fields, the playgrounds, to these, where they're fenced and gated. We don't even touch them on evenings and weekends now. And what's the result? Well, one is that the exact 30-year time span I showed you in which transportation modes changed is the exact 30-year time span in which childhood obesity rates tripled. Coincidence? No way. As we've gotten in the habit of throwing our kids in the backseat of the car for every trip, and by the way, building a world conducive to that, this is what we've ended up with. Indeed, people talk about an obesity epidemic, they're missing the underlying thing. We're really facing a chronic disease epidemic of a host of afflictions associated with sedentary lifestyles. Indeed, a disease, this special issue of Time magazine talks about a disease that we used to call adult onset diabetes. Adult onset diabetes. We thought you couldn't get it till your 40s or 50s or 60s. We now use the clinical term type 2 diabetes because we are seeing it in 9 and 10-year-olds. School nurses now have to be trained to take blood glucose measurements from young children in case they are being treated for this. It's part of the skill set. And indeed, my argument is this. Let's at very least start to change the conversation. Stop talking about an obesity epidemic, which is a tip of the iceberg. Let's talk about the underlying behaviors, which are epidemics of physical inactivity and indeed poor nutrition. And there's a reason I want to change the conversation, because if I can talk about a physical inactivity epidemic, then when I start to talk about the solution, helping kids get more physical activity, rebuilding a world where they can be free range, we make the connection. Okay? By the way, quick side note, just as my last political sort of tirade on this topic, people are arguing about whether, nationalized health care or public health, whether we do Obamacare or Romney care, good thing, bad thing. They are talking about the wrong thing. How we pay for it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the problem. So the next time you hear a state or a federal legislator whining about health care and whether we're doing the right or the wrong thing, tell them to shut up. Because seriously, I do it. I was in the State House a couple of months ago and I said, we're talking about the wrong thing, about whether we're paying. We have to actually attack the 3 underlying behaviors that are driving up healthcare costs in this country, and they are the primary risk factors for everything that we die of now. Tobacco use, physical inactivity, and poor nutrition. Those are the big 3. That's what's going to break the bank on healthcare in this country. So if you want to get at it, let's actually address those 3. Otherwise, forget it. We're just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic while we steam right into the iceberg. Okay, so that's the end of my public health tirade. I'm going to talk, obviously, mostly about physical activity. I have a unique perspective on it. I actually spent a lot of time studying it. I worked at the U.S. Olympic Training Center. I worked for Reebok's Human Performance Lab, where we talked about how do we get people to be more physically active and, wear athletic shoes in that case. I actually was a competitive athlete myself in a fairly obscure event in track and field. In fact, many would say it's the weirdest looking event they do in track. Does anybody know what the goofiest looking thing they do in track and field is?
Speed walking.
I hear pole vault, I hear triple jump, but somebody in walking, that's right, race walking. Yes, here it is, photographic evidence that I was a competitive race walker back in the day. You're allowed to laugh. It is, in fact, the funniest looking event. Yeah. Now, needless to say, it was a very long time ago, as evidenced by the fact that we only have black and white photography back then. The other giveaway is that those shorts were in style back when I was competing. I swear they were. This being, of course, the 1928 National Championships. Many will ask, this could go in a historic photo archive, couldn't it? Many will ask, why, Mark, did you choose to be a race walker? I was a pretty good endurance athlete. Why not run? Why race? It's obvious when I show you the next slide. Well, of course, it was the huge crowds that showed up at our competition. I am not making this up. This is the start of the 1984 Olympic trials. I competed in the Olympic trials in the 50-kilometer race walk. 50 kilometers is 31 miles. So by 5 miles, it's the longest foot race in the Olympics. 5 miles longer than the marathon. Many people don't know that. And like the marathon run, what they do is they start you in the stadium, you go out and do a loop around the city, and then come back and finish in the stadium. This is Los Angeles Coliseum. The 84 games were in LA, so this is the LA Coliseum. They also hosted the Olympic trials there. And they start you very early in the morning to avoid the heat of the day. Now, when we finished a couple of hours later, the stadium was packed. It was actually quite exciting to come back into the stadium. But at 6 a.m., you have to look very closely, and if you do, you can see my mom and dad right over here. That's really them. I'm not making that up. My mom, way to go, sweetheart, looking good. Just 30 miles to go, honey. Thanks, Mom. So anyway, I come from this background of thinking about competitive sport and athletics, and I worked in sports science and exercise physiology, and I can boil it all down to a couple of numbers. 3, really. That just is, and I'm going to encapsulate sort of the public health piece of the message for you. 30, 20, 365. 30 is the minutes per day we're told every American adult should be active. We know kids need at least an hour of physical activity a day, that those minimum recommendations will at least reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, all the things that we die of now in modern American society. You don't have to train for a marathon. If you could get out for a half-an-hour walk, and by the way, it doesn't even have to be structured exercise. We know that the person who walks a child to school 15 minutes in the morning, walks back and gets them in the afternoon 15. If that kid gets another half hour of play during the day, during recess, or being a free-range kid in their neighborhood, they get that hour, we're on the way to healthier communities. 20% of Americans get those guidelines, and in fact, that's probably an overestimate. What does that lead to? Well, you're thinking 365 days of the year, right, Mark? Sadly, no. Add 3 zeros, and you have an estimate of the number of premature deaths annually in the United States attributable to the diseases associated with sedentary lifestyles. The only thing that kills more of us prematurely is tobacco. And by the way, the tobacco numbers look to be flattening as we've changed social norms around tobacco consumption. Think about how much harder it is to smoke in public and how expensive cigarettes are now, not advertised on TV. We've really changed the social ecology of smoking in American society, but not of being sedentary. And we've got to take that lesson, because inactivity deaths continue to rise. It'll take first place next time they run these numbers. Interestingly enough, just 2 last graphs. This graph shows the percentage that get the 30 minutes per day that I talked about. 2 notable things about it. The yellow line here is the percentage of the population that supposedly gets it. 2 problems. One, it's based on self-report data, that is data that the Centers for Disease Control collects via telephone surveys, and we know people tend to tell you what you want to hear when you're on the phone with them. They also, by the way, when they survey them by phone, they've learned that they tend to be taller and weigh less than if you actually go measure it. Problem number 1. Problem number 2, look at the yellow line here, guys. It's flat for 20 years. Whatever we've been doing, telling people to exercise, telling them to go to the gym, giving them memberships, building health clubs at workplaces, it's not working. Telling people to exercise doesn't work. And the second point is this. When we do good programs, this is an intervention study that actually tried to get people to walk more over about a period of a year and a half. Over the first 6 months, they called them on the phone and sent them email reminders. This was actually done at Brown University. That was one of the collaborating universities on this research. And for a while, people increased their exercise minutes per week. That's all that is a graph of exercise minutes per week over a year and a half period. And here's the problem. Every time we do a graph like this, if we follow people long enough, we see the same shape, which is that it doesn't stick. We have a problem with stickiness. If all we do is behavior change, if all we do is implore you to do something, eat more fruits and vegetables, or go out and go for a walk every day, for a while I can get you enthused, and I can give you t-shirts and water bottles and prizes. We love to do that in health promotion. We give a lot of t-shirts and water bottles away, right? But to no avail. As far as permanent behavior change, we've really recognized we've got to go beyond just telling people to exercise or, for that matter, eat well. We've actually got to build environments where being physically active is once again a part of routine daily life. This should not sound like rocket science. Once you follow the logic and see that the evidence even bears this out, it takes you to a really interesting place, because you realize it's not that we stopped exercising. This is what? The Plymouth Plantation on the left, Lowell National Historic Park. You go to a place like Sturbridge, Williamsburg. You see people that are acting out that lifestyle of anywhere from 50 to 150 to 300 years ago. Physical activity was a requirement of daily living, wasn't it? After a day of working on your thatched roof at Plymouth Plantation, you didn't have to go to the gym to lift for a while. Your arms were already pretty tired, thank you very much. Right after carrying bales of textiles up and down in those mills up in Lowell, I don't suspect you had to say, well, I'm going to go out for a run now, after a 12-hour shift in the water-driven mill. What we've come to is a world where we don't have to be active as a part of daily life. And the question is, can we rebuild it? The picture on the top right, just building a gymnasium everywhere, that's what that study told us. That's not going to work. We better think about how do we build places where kids can be free range, and for that matter, adults too, as a part of daily life. Okay, so you should be asking, okay, smarty pants, fast talking guy, is there any evidence that we can do that? Is there data that connects environmental design to this behavior? And the answer is yes. Really interesting. If you look at the research evidence, which I read very closely, I've really pared it down to about 4 big piles that define places where people tend to be more physically active, just as a part of daily life, not because I'm scolding them to. And they should sound familiar to somebody who works in historic preservation, because these are the 4 characteristics. There tends to be a greater variety of different kinds of activity, or what we would call land uses, close together. There are good facilities connecting them, sidewalks, pathways, multi-use trails, bicycle lanes, for the active traveler, somebody not just in a car. Third, when you get to a destination, it should be designed in a way to reward you rather than punish you for showing up without a car, which is not what we've been designing for the last 30 or 40 years. And last but not least, it really has to be safe and accessible for everybody in the community, people of all income levels, of all physical abilities and disabilities. It's got to be designed in a way that accommodates everybody. So that's a nice idea, but I can show you pictures from all around the state. You guys know it. You work in those environments, I hope, where that was historically how we designed things. Mixed land use was what a traditional New England small town or big city was, right? The mix of live and work and shop and play, learn, pray, all those things were in proximity. Churches right on Main Street next to a common green where the city hall was, and major civic institutions, post office, library, nearby housing, neighborhood schools, right? None of that sounds unfamiliar, and it's much easier and more likely that somebody will walk among those destinations if they are that proximate to one another. But you need the facilities to do that. So everything from the mundane sidewalk to more advanced approaches like multi-use trails, like the East Bay Path that is within a stone's throw of where we stand right now, to bicycle lanes, to transit. Quick side note on this, I believe transit are a very important natural partner in this exercise because we know people who use transit tend to get more daily physical activity as a part of the natural trip, right, walking to and from the bus stop. Plus, it helps alleviate that dependence on the automobile, which is so often damaging to the environments that we're working on. By the way, quick note on this, I am a big fan of trails, like I mentioned the East Bay Path just here. And you have many. Rhode Island's done a great job of converting old rail corridors into multi-use pathways and trails. Let me say this, I like recreational trails, you know, the ones with a parking lot and a trailhead you can drive to, but they're not the winner. Because that still means it's a conscious effort. I have to put the bike on the car, drive. Give me a trail that connects to neighborhoods, to destinations, that connects to the other elements of the transportation network, like sidewalks and transit stops, bicycle lanes. Make it easy for my front door to be the trailhead. That's when we win. That's one of the reasons I love this trail. I can live in Warren and walk 2 blocks and be on the trail and then use it, or ride my bike 2 blocks and use it as a way to get to other destinations. There are people who commute to Providence up along this trail, right, by bicycle. Third, when I get to the destination, does it look like modern American design, the picture in the top right that says, come by car, right? Or do we build what we historically did, which are places that are very inviting to the pedestrian, the bicyclist, the transit rider who steps off the bus right there? By the way, let's be clear, modern zoning often requires that. All right? Yet we know bringing the building up to the street and including things like trees and benches and awnings, those are not just aesthetic treatments. Those are functional attributes for the pedestrian. I often think of my mom in her 70s who would walk to a store that there's a bench along the way and a shade tree to provide so she could stop along the way. But if she can't, in the middle of the summer on a hot day, doesn't have that stopping point, that shade, she might have to opt for the car. Right? So the design matters. Now, I show you the picture on the top, and I'm sorry if it's a little washed out. That's a Walgreens in Portland, Oregon, which is in fact up at the street, and there are street trees, and there are nice benches over here, and there's a beautiful bike rack, and this screening screens a fairly small parking lot for cars. The automobile parking is not the dominant architectural feature. God forbid, right? And there it is, and you say, Mark, that's all well and good, but that's Portland, Oregon, which we all know is a communist enclave. A bunch of socialists live out there on the left coast. They can do stuff like that. I, by the way, am a guy who knows how hard it is. I've served 6 years on my planning board in Scituate, Massachusetts. That's where I live. And I was the chair for a while. And I know how hard it is to get that. This is the standard Walgreens. They come in with this. They want a corner parcel. They want it set back from the road. They want the parking out front. Indeed, we don't just want 2 curb cuts. We now need 4 curb cuts to get cars in. Now, why do you need the extra curb cuts? What does the car have to be able to do now? Not just come to the front and park, but go through the drive-thru in the back, because God forbid we leave the seated position while we're picking up our Lipitor prescription, right? We wouldn't want to actually have to stand. We got to be able to get it and then drive right over to Dunkies, get a mega latte to wash it down, 200,000 calories. I'm not making fun. Everything about that is designed for the automobile, right? And it's not just Walgreens. I just happen to use pictures of Walgreens. I can get them everywhere. There's a nice Rhode Island CVS, same thing. Setback, and again, I'm not knocking CVS. Most zoning ordinances actually require this, right? And, by the way, most local boards, not pointing the finger, I'm just saying we tend to do this, say, look, we want economic development, and we ask for all that other stuff, bring the building up and give me bike racks and street trees, and they say it's going to cost more, we're not interested. We're going to take our application and walk away. So Neenah, Wisconsin, a decidedly not communist enclave in the center of Wisconsin, all right, they got the standard Walgreens. But Appleton, Wisconsin, next town over, also not a socialist enclave, got that one. A nice street front, respected their main street, which had buildings at the street. Indeed, would have loved to have seen that be multi-story in the same style as the one, and with some apartments or condominiums or office space above, and a true historic style of design. But at very least, they got that. And indeed, if they work with the developer, you could say, what do you need to make this work financially? But even if they're on board, there's a board that's going to permit this, and I would argue one of the most important things we can do is educate our elected and appointed officials. This is a guy who served on an elected planning board, to get them to understand it's worth sticking to your guns. Because in the moment when Walgreens tries to call the bluff and says, you know what, we don't want to do this, that's not our standard design on the lower left, this weird historic style, you bring it up to this street and all this crazy stuff you want, that's our design, and if you make us do this other thing, we're going to take our permit and walk away. What does the elected board have to be willing to say in that moment? See ya. Because we have a vision for our community. That's right. Which is really, really hard to do if you sit on an elected board, isn't it? It's hard. It's easier, however, if a couple of dozen people are at the public meeting and line up at the microphone and give a rational moment of during public testimony. If they come up and they say, hi, I'm Mark, and I'm with the Warren Historic Preservation Group, and I'd also like to point out that although we should all get 30 minutes of physical activity a day, only about 10 to 20% of us actually do so. The result is that we're looking at 365,000 premature deaths every year, and we're going to break the bank on our national health care system. And furthermore, my kid who doesn't drive yet, or my mom who doesn't drive anymore, can't walk to this store unless you design it the way that you've proposed. So boards, stick to your guns. Don't let them don't let them build the giant parking lot out front. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. See how I did that? I did a minute of testimony and I made the point. We've got to be doing that all the time. And I think we should be adding public health to the quiver. It's another arrow in the quiver. Fourth element, remember I said there were 4 elements? It's got to be safe. I can be close, there can be a sidewalk, there can be a nice, bike parking, whatever. I still can't feel like I'm taking my life into my hands. Here's the good news. Our colleagues in traffic engineering, I'm an engineer by training, know how to design places where motor vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit can coexist. We know how to do that. In fact, there's a movement called Complete Streets. Who's heard that term? Complete Streets. Okay, everybody in the room should know about this. This is a national campaign. In fact, your Department of Transportation has espoused an acceptance of complete streets. The idea is this: a street is not complete unless it takes into account 4 users: the pedestrian, the bicyclist, transit, and motor vehicles. So the day of just designing for the car, and if there's a little extra room staking a sidewalk on the side, that should be done. Now we should look at the corridor and say, what are all the potential users of the corridor? What are the land uses along this corridor? And then design according to all of them. And that means maybe some space for a bicyclist, maybe space for a pedestrian. So that's where these kinds of designs come from. So again, to reiterate, the research tells us, in answer to my question, can you build places that are stickier? Remember the stickiness problem, where the physical activity dropped off after the first 6 months? Can we make it so that instead, if I get somebody encouraged to start walking every day, it actually sticks? The answer is yes. These are the 4 attributes. The research tells us that. That website, by the way, is maintained by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation at UC San Diego. If you're enough of a nerd that you want to read some of those research studies and say, where is he getting this? That's the place. It's a fairly complete bibliography of the research, called activelivingresearch.org. And that's the term that's being used, creating active living settings, what I would call free-range settings, right? Well, Mark, this is such a good idea. Shouldn't the free market take us there? We're a capitalist society. This is such a desirable outcome. Why doesn't the business community get to that space? Why isn't the economy telling us this is what people want? Here's the answer. It is. Indeed, there are now a growing number of studies that connect some of the most desirable places for people to live in America are designed just the way I'm describing. There's a really cool website called Walk Scores. Anybody heard of this website? Hands up there. Oh, write this one down. WALKSCORE, all one word, Walk Score. You can put in any address in the United States. It will give you a 1 to 100 score of the walkability of that site based on nearby destinations. So it's an imperfect tool. It doesn't take into account how good the sidewalks are. There are other factors, my other 3 factors. But it gets land use. And here's the point. I put in real places where I've been on walk audits or where we've done work. So when we were working in North Kingstown, you know, downtown Little Wickford there, the little Main Street business district, gets a walk score well up into the 60s or 70. You go out into some of the suburban sprawl that surrounds it, right, the classic housing subdivisions with nothing nearby, you get walk scores like 20 and 30 or lower. Even over near Wickford Junction, which is this big retail redevelopment, but totally not pedestrian-oriented nor well-connected, you still get much lower walk scores, right? And what we know is this study in particular connected higher housing values to higher walk scores. In other words, people see the higher desirability. We are seeing realty websites connect to the walk score website because people, when they're shopping for a home now, are saying, how walkable is it? What can I get to on foot from there? Indeed, this publication asked the question, in the 21st century, what are home buyers looking for? They did a special issue in 2010, and they said it's stuff like in-town living, the ability to walk to a corner store, to a shop, to a school, to a park or a playground, have a bike trail nearby. This, by the way, is a publication not of the Sierra Club, but of the National Association of Realtors. When they now do their annual surveys of realtors and say, what are people telling us they want to buy? These are the attributes. They want to buy proximity to other destinations, walkable main streets. Look at the picture, for God's sakes, guys. It's a woman on a bike with a baguette and sunflowers in the basket. It looks like the Netherlands. 15 years ago, the front of that magazine, a National Association of Realtors magazine, would have had a home on a 3-acre lot with a 3 or 4 car garage as the American dream, right? Not making that up. $4 a gallon gas has changed the conversation. Thank you very much. Maybe one of the best things that's happened from a public health standpoint in the country, from a transportation standpoint. Indeed, Paul Adelman, who's my colleague, we're going to do the walk audit a little later, shared this really cool article from Builder magazine from just last month, where the title of the article is Walkability, Why We Care and Why You Should Too. Why home builders should be looking at walkability. In fact, that shot is from a project that Paul's firm worked on in Concord, Massachusetts, that is built basically on the premise of walkability. Am I overstating that, Paul? That's one of the central selling points of that development is you can walk around and to destinations. The game is changing, the economics are changing, this is desirable. We're also seeing, by the way, communities totally rethink this form of retail development. So this is kind of classic retail-style suburban sprawl. There's the same company, that's a Rite Aid in North Kingstown, that's the Rite Aid in downtown Wickford. Oh wow, up at the street, walkable. Not necessarily with a giant parking lot out in front. The game is changing. And we need to make sure we're adding our voice to this conversation because now community leaders are recognizing this is a much more sustainable form of economic development. These places across the country, I can get pictures of strip malls and big boxes that are at 50% vacancy rates. They're just not that robust a design. They last for about 10 years and then they wane. And then we're trying to figure out how to reuse. What a crummy reuse conversation. Let's be talking about how to adaptively reuse 100-year-old buildings, not 10-year-old buildings. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's the conversation we're in. Indeed, this is called the Town Center in Watertown, New York. We did work up there. That's in Upper State here. It must be cool because it's got an E on the end of the word town, right? So that classies it up. That's like raising the pinky, isn't it? Oh, the Town Center. Sadly, as we build this across the country, this is what I've seen. We eviscerate this. The historic downtowns that have all the businesses, the former grocery store, hardware store, downtown businesses that all die when we put all the economic energy out on the edge. Right? These are not disconnected decisions. We have to see that when we make the decision to say yes to that, we are effectively saying no to that in many ways. Right? Now, we're working on coming up with a clever adaptive reuses of these, but the real original use, retail on the first floor and businesses above, housing above or businesses, that was a pretty good use pattern, and we're seeing many communities actually go back to that, re-embracing that style of design. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. You need to continue to be part of the change, and I'm going to ask you to add this public health message to your work. So I'm going to ask you to speak up, to act up, and to step up. I'm going to talk about a little bit of each of these. Speak up, make this connection about these 4 elements of healthy design. Mix of land uses, connectivity of the network, good site design, safety and access. There's a good evidence-based argument, and don't just focus on one. Some of us kind of go down one. I know there are trail advocates in the group, and the trails are your thing. That's great, but that's not enough. That's the trail, by the way, at the South Kingstown Rail Station near at URI. But that's good, and that allows people to take the train and then ride. But don't just talk about that. Talk about the proximity of destinations. Talk about safety. Talk about site design, those details. In Morganton, North Carolina, they had a beautiful downtown theater. It's right on their historic, county courthouse square. There's the courthouse on the left. And it was going to be taken down. In fact, the developer came in and said, "You're ready for a big Cineplex 8-screen movie theater. We're going to build it out on the edge here." And they said, "No. How about buy some of the adjoining buildings to this now defunct movie theater, restore that as a downtown movie theater, but with the 6 or 7 or 8 screens that you need, because that's what the modern model of business in movie theaters says. You got to have multiple screens." Well, they did that, and it's now an anchor business in their downtown. They used the historic theater, kept the marquee, but then accreted some of the adjoining parcels, and now they've got the 7-screen theater in downtown. It's a critical engine to the economy of that little main street. How about in Rutland, Vermont, where they got the Walmart to come into the downtown area, and out on Route 7, out on the edge, proximate to their historic Main Street business district. It's helped keep that entire district alive. So they didn't say no to Walmart, they just said, "Yeah, but come here." By the way, they used the parking lot for their Saturday morning farmers markets. Or the Epinog Village, where they're having a big discussion. It's been an ongoing one. My first visit there was, I think, 5 years ago, talking about the circulator. Anybody familiar with this whole project? So you guys know. And I would argue the discussion about the transportation facility here has everything to do with how healthy that core district really ends up being. Because if it's all just about moving cars through fast, none of those businesses will ever come back. Those buildings will all suffer perpetually, right? Physically suffer to the damage associated with the vehicles, but also there will never be a vibrant street life if it's only about cars. So, but redesigning in a way that actually thinks about pedestrians and bicyclists, even transit, really can help restore the life to those buildings and to those streets. Back to my home in upstate New York. How about the network? Well, this is the Erie Canal Towpath Trail that goes across upstate New York from Albany to Buffalo. Could sing you a little song about it, but I won't do that to you. It's about a mule named Sal. Do you guys know that song? You learned that in Rhode Island? Okay, see, upstate New York, you learned it in about 3rd grade music class. So there's the trail. Well, to their great credit, that has been turned into a beautiful multi-use trail across the state, which has revitalized the economy of some of the small towns like mine, Brockport. But most notably, it is a trail that kids can use to walk to school. So it's not just a recreational corridor. It connects neighborhoods to schools, to downtown districts. There's one of the historic lift bridges right there. It's a national heritage corridor, and well, it should be. It's a wonderful asset, but it follows my rule of connecting destinations. It's functional. It's not just a recreational corridor. Indeed, businesses, that is developers, sell proximity to the canal trail when they're building homes. It says woods on the canal path. The neighborhood is not just called the woods. It's called the woods on canal path. They're selling that attribute, the walkability, the bikeability of this. They know it's part of the success of the business. My little town of Scituate, Massachusetts, I give my wife all the credit. They've developed an historic bike route in which we're putting bike racks and historic structures all around the town. There's the Irish Mossing Museum. They've got a map online. I think it's a wonderful example of connecting our historic assets by foot and by bike and telling people, hey, they're not that far apart. You could do a tour of all of these assets, not just when we're having a conference here in town, but all the time. Anytime you come, walk around Warren, ride your bike around Warren, and see all of these. How about this? Oak Park, Illinois, I know who was the council president at the time, council chair, three times Walgreens came in and said, this is a high traffic corner. We would like to raise this whole building and build a classic Walmart right on the corner there. You know what it would have looked like, right? My photo before. 3 times the board said no to economic development in their town. They said no to the dollars that were going to come until Walgreens was ready to adaptively reuse the building. And that's the backside, kind of classic looking modern Walgreens, but the building is still there on the corner. It's up at the street. It saved the character of that corner as far as I'm concerned. And by the way, in the end, Walgreens ends up with a better building, something they can put in their portfolio and show proudly, rather than another schlocky Walgreens that looks like anywhere else in the United States. It could be the photo I use for my yucky Walgreens photo. But they don't have that there now, right? Because the board stuck to their guns, and because they had public support, people showed up for the public meetings and said this is the right thing to do. Last, again, my little town of Brockport, New York, the State Department of Transportation came in and said, we're ready to improve Main Street. What does improve mean in engineer talk? Faster, more cars faster. Thanks to their local bike walk advocacy group and the historic preservation folks who came together in all of the public meetings and really stuck to their guns as they moved through the design process, that Main Street, by the way, I love this bill, I'll show you in a second. That Main Street became that. Rather than adding vehicle lanes and moving more cars through faster, they got bicycle lanes, they got curb extensions for pedestrian crossing, they slowed the traffic, if anything. They kept the on-street parking for the post office. Don't you love this building, this historic building here? That's an old Ivory soap ad that they've restored and kept there. I just love that. It's kind of one of the iconic things of that little downtown. Act up. Be a change agent. Get people out looking at it on foot. There's a reason you have so many walking tours as part of the agenda here. It's because people really get this when they interact with the space as a pedestrian, as a bicyclist. There's a great bike tour, too. When you get out on the ground and feel it as a pedestrian, you understand why standing next to a giant parking lot in a building that's set back there versus a building here with some benches and some awnings feels different. It's more inviting for the bicyclist or pedestrian. These aren't just aesthetic treatments. They are functional differences. So be that person in your community. Get people out. Get elected officials out. Get boards out. Do walk audits. That's what we call these things. That's all you're doing. You're auditing the environment on foot. Do bike audits. Change the conversation. And by the way, launch an interdisciplinary team that talks about the health of your community, defining health broadly. So you could talk about the social health, the environmental health, the public health, the economic health, right, of the community. All of those are part of the health of the community. At very least, be a loud and vocal advocate for complete streets. This is a national movement, but it turns out we still have to have the discussion about every roadway. Because it's still easy to fall into the trap, because we all drive a lot, to fall into the discussion about how do we move more cars through here. We've got to remind ourselves that's always a losing battle. Because the cars will fill the space we give to them. But we will often leave aside the space for the bicyclist or the pedestrian. I'm so proud that this Main Street right here, that's my son riding his bike on the sidewalk that I walked to school on as a kid. And this, when they redid Main Street, is the new bicycle lane that they got them to put in there. So now he would be able to safely ride a bike there. And there are simpler steps. You're saying, I can't change my zoning ordinance tomorrow. Oh my God, I can't fight the big battle about a Walgreens. Well, how about a buy a bench program? Or how about a buy a bike rack program? In these two towns, they actually had design contests. This is Columbus, Indiana, Durham, North Carolina, to define an iconic local bicycle rack. And in building the bike friendliness of their community, Durham is the home of the Durham Bulls, right? Bull Durham, the movie, the baseball team and all. So there's their iconic bike rack, and this is a big letter C for Columbus, Indiana. So some of this stuff can be done at the very simple level. That could be a scout troop that leads that campaign, right? It doesn't have to be sort of always on the side of government to do it. If you don't do anything else, I implore you, I challenge you to be an active role model yourself. Think about opportunities to leave the car behind sometimes and take that pedestrian, that bicycle, that transit trip instead. Because we know one of the things that invites others to walk is the presence of people out there. When you ask them, why don't you walk? Well, I don't see anybody else out there. It must be dangerous. So you, by your mere act of going out as a pedestrian, are inviting others to join you. All right? So if you don't do anything else, look for that opportunity to leave it behind. You're thinking this guy is like a raving froth-at-the-mouth lunatic about this, isn't he? And I am. And there are lots of reasons we should do this. But I'm going to go ahead and tell a bridge story because I got a minute, I think, so if I can. It's not the one you were talking. So there are all the reasons we should be building healthier places, right? We could talk about the fact that, I don't know if you're aware of this, we kill almost 4,000 pedestrians in America every year. Closer to 40,000 die in motor vehicle collisions, but closer to 400,000, as I showed you earlier, due to sedentary living and poor nutrition. We could talk about our dependence on foreign oil and all the foreign entanglements that leads to. We could talk about the fact that businesses are now looking to locate in healthier communities. They actually ask about how good is employee retention, what's your quality of life, what are healthcare costs like? You know, there's a reason the Googles of the world end up in the Boulder, Colorados of the world, because they're going to have this geeky population of really active people who are not going to cost them as much in healthcare. It's really true. That's part of the assessment sheet now. They're looking for active community design. But the example was driven home to me some years ago my wife and I, it was my birthday. It was one of the big O numbers. It was 40, and I was having a little bit of early midlife crisis. I was leaving a magazine I worked at for a long time. I was starting a PBS television series. I was trying to write a book. There was a lot going on. I was stressing out. And my wife saw, she was very fearful I was going to come home with a Harley Davidson motorcycle or something, some midlife crisis thing. So she said, let's go out to dinner to our favorite place in town. Now I live in Scituate, Massachusetts. Let's go out to dinner at our favorite place in town, and we're going to have the "we love the man you've become" talk. We're okay with you. You're doing great. As we're coming home from dinner that night, it turns out that from downtown, where our favorite little local restaurant is, to our neighborhood, you cross over a bridge that goes over a tidal estuary. Now you, as the ocean state dwellers, know what a tidal estuary is. You know that there's a flow, and at certain times, it turns the tide is high enough, you can jump off that bridge. And it's sort of a rite of passage for local kids to jump the bridge, but you have to be a local because you got to know when the tide is right and where the current's flowing, or you could really get hurt, barnacles, the whole bit. So as it happens, we're coming home that night, and a couple of girls, young girls, are hanging on the rail. This is the water, the rail's behind them, they're hanging on looking out, and I can hear a conversation between them and a boy who's down in the water saying, "Hurry up, jump! Are you sure it's deep? Is it cold? No, it's not cold. Just hurry up and jump. Is it deep enough? Yeah, it's fine. Is the current bad? No, it's not bad. Hurry, just hurry. Why should we hurry? Because it's cold." So, 14-year-old boy, not a lot of brain cells. They're having that whole conversation. So it's clear to me as we're going by, these girls are nervous. And we come up, and I look at my wife, and I look at the kids. I do not say a word. Proof that I married the right woman. She looks at me. She looks at them. She goes, "Just give me your wallet. Go ahead." I know, it's right. True. So I take my shoes off, give her my wallet, climb. I go to the rail. I go, "Guys, do you want to jump? I'm from right here. I know it's safe. I'll jump with you if you want." They go, "Really?" And I climb over the rail. The kid down the bottom, "Hey, mister, are you jumping?" Like I need to hear, "Hey, mister," on my 40th birthday, right? So I say, "Yeah, it's safe." I go, "Come on, let's jump. 1, 2, 3, we'll go." And I go, and they don't go, but then they go, and they all jump and swing to the side. Everybody gets out and fine. I left out a little detail in the story. What was my mode of travel that evening, to and from dinner with my wife? Was it? If I'd been in a car, would it have happened that way? If I was surrounded by 3,000 pounds of steel and glass, would I have interacted with them like that? Well, how was I traveling? We had walked to our little restaurant downtown, and we were walking home. And as I came by, I'm this close to those girls. You're on the railing, I'm right here. And I saw them, and I recognize them from, I don't know the kids, but I recognize them from town. And I can see they're actually pretty nervous. I see the boy down there, and I get what's going on. They're feeling the peer pressure, but they're really nervous. And they, by the way, know me, because I'm the guy who walks and rides his bike all over town. I'm the weird guy you see with the 24-pack of toilet paper strapped to his bike coming back from the grocery store. But at least they know I'm the neighborhood guy. They see me with my kids, right? I'm not, So it's okay for me to sort of offer the jump, climb over and do that. Because in the moment that I'm walking home with them, in the moment that I'm standing there looking at them, they're my kids, right? They might as well be my kids. I have a sense of ownership and responsibility. I can't just walk by. So I have to make sure, God forbid I wake up tomorrow morning reading the news, some kid broke her leg jumping off the bridge in my neighborhood. So I had a couple of choices. I could have said, "Hey guys, get off, knock it off." Or I could stay there and take some stewardship over them, which is what I chose to do. Because, you guys, they are all of our kids. All of them. And we owe to them a better outcome than what we've been building for the last 30 or 40 years. See, I remind myself of this last photo. Those are my two kids, now 16 and 18. The one on the right's getting ready to go to college. They are part of the first generation that's going to end up with statistically shorter life expectancies than their parents. Don't argue with me about that. The data's there. That's the trend line. They're going to end up with statistically shorter life expectancies than you and I, not because of Ebola or avian flu or something. It's because of the diseases of sedentary living. We know how to build a place where kids live free-range lifestyles. You know it because it's often the very places you work on. This is a really big and important task, and it's about a lot more than saving one building, you guys. This is about saving the fabric of our communities. That's what you're working on. It's nothing less than that. That's why I consider it such an honor to talk to you. Thank you for the good work you do, and keep it up. Keep it up. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
So did everybody, I'm going to make a weather announcement in just a minute. So I'll make that announcement in a second. So let's see, tours and panel discussions. We get a little break and we start up again at 10:45. The program describes everywhere that you want to be. Boat tours, now pay attention. Shh. Lunch, for those of you that aren't taking it with you on some sort of a tour, will be at the south end of town, down at St. Mary's Church. The closing reception will be at the Warren Armory, and it's a wonderful historic armory, so you won't want to miss that. Now, the weather announcement. The morning bike tour isn't going to happen because it's too wet, but everything else is on. Though April showers may come your way, we won't cancel any preservation walks today. So if the rain is pouring, just keep on enjoying Warren. Because to cower from a shower would be wrong whenever April showers come along. Thank you very much.